Hello and welcome to Unit 4, Lecture 1. The topic for Unit 4 is the Industrial Revolution occurring in America following the Civil War. Today we're going to focus on factors that brought about the Industrial Revolution and how the United States was able to transform into mainly a rural nation into mostly an urban nation in a relatively short period of time. The time we're looking at basically is from 1865 through 1900. And the transformation the United States made during this time was nothing short of remarkable. It went from before this period producing 1/3 of the industrial output of Great Britain per capita to afterwards becoming one of the most richest industrialized nations in the world. The United States increased its efficiency and productivity, and another way to look at it is in 1880, most Americans worked in non-farming roles. By 1890, 2/3 of Americans worked for wages. And by 1913, the United States produced 1/3 of the world's total industrial output. So some major changes were occurring in America during this time.
Because these things will change. Can you feel it now? These walls that they put up to hold us back will fall down. This revolution.
There are two eras of industrialization in the United States, pre-Civil War and post-Civil War. In this unit we're going to focus on post-Civil War, but I just want to mention the industries that led to the beginning of industrialization in America. The first industry was the textile industry, in which Samuel Slater brought over the textile mill, which led to the factory system. Hydropower was used to turn turbines, which created fabric, and the sewing machine was invented, so the first factories were formed. Railroads were a huge economic producer. They spurred the economy on, and also iron and coal. Here you can see some of the first inventions during the first industrial revolution: the rotary press, the cotton gin, which completely changed American history, the plow and the mechanical reaper, which benefited farmers greatly, the sewing machine, the telegraph, and the early train. Now, following the Civil War, the railroads, oil, steel, and electricity would all lead to monumental changes in the American economy and the American way of life. So next, I want to focus in on factors that allowed the United States to industrialize as quickly as it did. One of the most important factors was the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad. The economy spurred economic growth, like I mentioned earlier. The railroad tied all the different sections of the United States, the North, the South, and the East, and the West together, and it made the economy one. Goods could be produced and shipped to markets much easier, which led to greater revenue and more money as capital. The Transcontinental Railroad was built mainly by immigrants, mainly by Chinese immigrants, and it also led to the creation of time zones in order to standardize schedules for the transportation of goods and people. And it was all made possible by the government in the Pacific Railway Act. The government, was very significant in the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad. It provided land grants. It helped clear out the Native Americans. So if it was not for the government involvement, the railroad probably would never have been completed. See a picture of the railroad completion, Transcontinental Railroad, and the time zones that were created. Secondly, in terms of industrialization, there was a significant labor force. There was no shortage of workers, and part of this was due to the fact that 3 million Europeans immigrated to the United States between 1865 and 1874. The United States population during this time went from around 45 million to from 45 million, excuse me, to over 70 million from 1865 to 1900. And many of those, many of that population change increase came from immigrants coming in looking for work, and most of them were able to find work, which for the industrialists has provided a great source of labor. The United States did not need to rely on any foreign country for any of the natural resources that were necessary for industrialization. There was an abundance of coal, iron, oil, grain, water, all the things that were necessary to power the machinery, and the new inventions that were being produced was readily available within the United States itself. One of the most significant factors that brought about industrialization was the availability of capital. The Civil War was a tragic episode in American history, but one thing that it did produce was the first class of millionaires. There were business owners that made significant amounts of money during the Civil War by providing the government, having government contracts. And so when the Civil War was over, there was a great deal of money to be invested in many of the new inventions and ideas that were coming forth. Following the Civil War, in the United States there were more inventions, 10 times as many as had been prior to the Civil War in the entirety of American history. And a big reason for that was there was the economic backing for these people with these ideas, which bolstered the United States economic system of capitalism, in which private owners provide the goods and services rather than the government.
Money, 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 make us smile.
Now, like I just mentioned, there were significant inventions that were discovered following the Civil War. First, in the area of electricity, Thomas Edison came up with the light bulb. There's some controversy over whether he or Tesla did it. But anyway, the light bulb came into being, as well as DC, direct current electricity, which is like battery operated. George Westinghouse came up with alternating current electricity, in which electricity could travel a certain distance. And then Nikola Tesla invented the Tesla coil and the first hydroelectric plant. And all of these things together provided power, which led to greater efficiency and production once it was, moved into different areas.
We're gonna rock down to Electric Avenue, and then we'll take it higher. Oh, we're gonna rock down to Electric Avenue, and then we'll take it higher.
And I also want to mention the significance of the government by providing in the Constitution for providing patents, protections for individuals' inventions. This led to more people wanting to invent things and come up with something that would be, that would change the way people lived. Here you can see one of the first cities illuminated through electricity. In the area of transportation, there were also great gains made. The steam engine was invented by James Watt. It eventually was placed on the steamboat, which was discovered by Fitch and Fulton, and then the locomotive. And this just led to, again, greater efficiency in transportation, not only transportation of people, but maybe more importantly at this time, transportation of goods, cut down costs of shipping goods, made it more profitable, and more money could be made. And finally, communication. You had the telegraph invented by Samuel Morse. The telephone by Alexander Graham Bell, and the typewriter by Christopher Sholes. And again, all of these things helped people communicate, greater efficiency, was good for business, and had a major impact on the industrialization era.
But here's my number, so call me maybe.
And that concludes Lecture 1 of Unit 4. Today we took a look at why industrialization following the Civil War occurred as quickly as it did. In the next lecture, we'll take a look at the men responsible for much of this industrialization, the industrialists, as well as the government's role in helping industrialists succeed during this era.